In this video, I'll be going over every gadget in the final Season 3 and giving my opinion on where they all stand in a tier list. Timestamps will be below if you want to find a specific one. First, let's go over what each of the tiers means. S tier has gadgets that I consider to be some of the best and that I rarely ever take off a character. These gadgets are so good that they can literally make or break a game depending on if you have them. A tier are gadgets that are very strong but aren't really considered a necessity for all loadouts. B tier includes gadgets that are fairly well balanced and provide a moderate amount of utility. C tier has gadgets that fulfill niche roles well, but outside of these roles or specific circumstances end up being less useful than other gadgets. And D tier has gadgets that I think need buffs or reworks to become more useful for the player base at large. And now that we've gone over what the tiers mean, let's get started on the list. The Goo Grenade is a very versatile gadget that can do things such as allowing you to block off doorways, create cover, provide ways to climb up structures, and even trap opponents in certain situations. I wouldn't fault anyone for running this gadget, but there are some other gadgets that we'll get to later in this list that I personally would prefer to use over this one. However, it's not bad by any means, so it's going into the B tier. The Pyro Grenade is unfortunately not very strong in the current sandbox of the game, as the main use for it is to get rid of gas or goo, neither of which are being used at high levels very much right now. The damage by itself is really not great, so I'm going to have to put it in the C tier. I'd move it up if goo or gas was used more, but that just isn't really the case in a lot of games. Since the beta times of this game, people have usually opted to use the gas grenade over the Pyro Grenade simply because it has better damage over time and covers a larger area. The most common use for this grenade is to delay cash outs, and it does a fairly good job of it. I'm going to put it in the B tier, as it's not particularly overpowered, but not super weak either. Frag Grenade has taken over the grenade meta because of its very high, practically instantaneous damage. I also like to use it with the light class most often. This is a very good way to damage people chasing you if you ult fire at your feet. I place this in the A tier. Flashbang isn't a very strong grenade, and maybe that's for the best. The reason why it's not as good as it is in games like CS2 or Valorant is because the time to kill is much higher in the finals. And oftentimes the flash effect wears off so fast that the only thing it did was just annoy your opponent. I guess you could combine it with stun gun for maximum annoyance, but it just doesn't bring much team utility and you are better suited running almost anything else. It's going in the D tier for now. RPG is probably one of the best gadgets in the entire game. Its free damage with a click can be used to destroy the arena. If you have two of them on your team, along with the medium giving you a jump pad, you can do very strong opening damage on your engagements. It's also one of the strongest counters to light players. If you aren't running RPG as a heavy, you're actively nerfing yourself. I'd place it in the S tier. Pyro Mine, just like the Pyro Grenade, isn't super strong on its own. While it definitely has a better damage profile than the grenade, I often find explosive mines almost always could have done the job better, with one exception. It is very good at combating triple medium teams with the defib, so I'll put it in the C tier. Dome Shield is another gadget that I never take off when I'm using heavy. Dome Shield got a major change in the most recent update, bringing the duration down from 12 seconds all the way to 5.5 seconds. This is definitely a major change as it means it's not quite as good at defending people taking cash outs, but it still should be valuable during fights, just not as powerful, and it's still long enough to allow you to get a revive off with it. I'm going to put it at the top of the A tier. Motion sensor is kind of a waste of a slot. I'm going to put it in the C tier because it does have some niche use cases, and it's okay at giving info for your team, but in general there's just much better utility to use for heavy than this. Barricade is a really good option for both blocking off doorways and for creating cover out of nowhere if you need it. I personally prefer it more than the Goo Grenade because the Barricade is much more durable and it's a lot easier to maneuver around as on-the-go cover. I personally would put Barricade in A tier. C4 is a personal favorite of mine to use on heavy. It's great at delaying cash outs and destroying the arena without wasting an RPG slot. In terms of what heavy has to offer in their kit, I think it's an A tier gadget that allows heavies to have a little more destructive potential. Anti-Grav Cube is something that was long considered to be a bit of a meme pick, but with the addition of the Winch Claw, it has graduated from being a throwaway option into something that can actually be viable once in a while. The idea is that with the Winch Claw and Anti-Grav Cube combined, you can move cash outs into places that they probably shouldn't be. You can also use it to get some impromptu movement upwards or to block off entrances, but these situations are very niche and often don't make as much of a difference. I'm going to put it in the C tier because it's a niche pick that's very good on certain maps, but basically useless on some of the others. Explosive Mine is a pretty good option for medium and heavy players. If you put two right next to each other, the explosion should be able to kill both light players and medium players who step on them, and it's very hard for melee players to counter them. I'll put them in the B tier. APS Turret is really powerful for a few reasons. One is that it counters heavy RPG, and two is that it counters a lot of lights grenade spam. It also can stop shots fired from the MGL or the CL40 if you end up facing them. Because things like the RPG are so strong, having an APS can be very good, landing it in the A tier. The Reshaper is a bit of an interesting pick. It allows you to fully counter things such as landmines and barricades without triggering their effects, and you can even get rid of armed grenades and make RPG shots disappear midair if you time it right. I personally like this gadget, but because it is only useful if you come up against those things like barricades and landmines, it makes it an inherently niche pick. I'll put it in C tier, but if landmines ever become a strong part of the meta again, this could be a good option for you. Jump pad is a staple of the medium loadout that I rarely take off. The ability to give your team free movement to high ground or a large burst of momentum when at an angle can be super helpful, especially if you have a heavy or two on your team. I would put this in the A tier. Zipline is similar to the jump pad in that it is a good movement option, but it has a few key differences. The first is that it's better at helping you get ahead or catch up in game's pacing if you are behind. The second being that it goes further than the jump pad and can help you out immensely in situations like Monaco suspended structures. And thirdly, its main downside is that it's easier to get shot at while you are on it compared to the jump pad. I would put it in the A tier because it's still very strong, and it's really up to you whether you think jump pad or zipline is better, or just run both. Gas Mine is a great gadget for delaying cash outs and certain areas of the map in general. If you place it right, enemies will be forced to shoot it before taking a cash out, which will trigger the gas anyways, meaning that they have to use an ability, if they have one, to counter it. But outside of this, the gas mine isn't as good as the explosive mines, especially in raw killing potential, and in some cases, the person taking the cash out can just be healed during it and they'll survive. So I'm going to put it in the B tier. The Defibrillator is the medium's most powerful gadget, hands down. Much like the RPG, you're kind of doing a disservice to your team if you aren't running this as a medium, as it can sometimes be the difference between your team winning or losing a fight. Just make sure that you know when to use it, because the amount of times I've seen a medium defibrillate someone mid-revive is honestly depressing. Because of how strong it is, I have to put it in the S tier. Glitch traps got reworked at the start of the season, turning a gadget that used to be a bit of a meme into something that is now legitimately powerful. The amount of times I've seen glitch traps mess me or the enemy team up is actually ridiculous. If you have trouble with triple defib medium teams or dashing lights, glitch trap is one of the best things that you can run. Additionally, because it notifies you when someone triggers it, I sometimes use it as a scouting tool to see if anyone is at a certain doorway or power position. I'm going to put it in the A tier. Thermal Bore is a gadget that was introduced for light at the beginning of Season 3. It was basically a ranged version of the breaching charge. What it allowed you to do is fire an explosive into a part of the arena, and then after a second that explosive would detonate, leaving behind a large cloud of smoke and making a hole in whatever structure you fired it into. I personally prefer this much more because the ease of use is much better. It can do two things that the breaching charge can't: knock down suspended structures from below and clear out gas. I'll put Thermal Bore in the B tier. Breaching charge is a lot like the C4 for light. I personally prefer the Thermal Bore for the reasons mentioned prior, but if you play very close range and want destructive capabilities as a light, it's a decently good niche option for certain maps and strategies. I'll put it in the C tier. Gateway is one of the best pieces of team utility that has ever been given to light. You can transport your team to high places, create cash out pressure, improve your odds of being ahead on pacing during tournaments, and it can even be used as a method for a quick escape if you need it. I almost never play light without using a gateway just because it provides so much utility, landing it in the S tier for me. Tracking Dart was better when medium had it in my opinion. I don't really see much use to run this over Sonar Grenades, but if you really want to highlight one person for a very long time, I suppose it's an okay option. Personally, the times where I end up tagging someone with the Tracking Dart, they are either too far away for it to matter, or close enough that shooting them is just a better option. I'll put it in the C tier, and for those Tracking Dart enjoyers out there, let me know how you all find value from this thing. Vanish Bomb is a popular item for lights running dash or grapple to give them a little bit of the utility that Cloak provides. It unfortunately takes up a valuable utility slot that you could put grenades or another gadget in, but it's not a bad option by any means, so I'm going to put it in the B tier. Thermal Vision is probably one of the worst picks you can make in a light loadout. The only reason I can see this being justifiable is for accessibility reasons, but there's really no competitive advantage to be gained here. It highlights targets within medium to short range, but if you're that close, you should probably see them anyways. I really don't think that the new strategy of using smoke grenades with this at all makes up for its overall bad performance. Not to mention that it makes gas and mines almost invisible, which has killed me way too many times than I care to admit. I'm putting it in the D tier. Moving on to a much more different ability, the stun gun is one of the best tools in a lights kit for a few reasons. It can pretty much freeze opponents in place for a little bit, and provided you don't play stupid, can get you and your team an easy kill. It can also instantly deny cash outs, which is very valuable, and when paired with the gateway allows lights to have a lot of options to defend cash outs. I'm going to put it in the S tier. Smoke Grenade is unfortunately probably one of the more useless items in the game. Well, you can maybe make the argument that it makes reviving people slightly easier. That's about the only use for it right now. And yes, you can pair it with thermal vision if you want, but that's more of a meme build, and it doesn't do too well when you get to the higher level lobbies. I have to put it in the D tier. Switch Grenade is another gadget that I almost always use when playing light class personally. It allows you to disable the abilities of all enemies hit by it for 5 seconds. This makes it a very good counter against shielding heavies and heal beam mediums. If you face a lot of these players, I recommend you try it out, and I'm going to put it in the A tier. And finally, we have Sonar Grenade. This used to be a gadget for medium before it got moved over to the light class. I think this gadget is very good, especially in game modes like Terminal Attack, and it's also very helpful in solo queue when teammates might not always listen to your callouts. I usually find it better than Tracking Dart because you don't need line of sight for it to trigger, and it can also ping entire teams. I would put it in the A tier. And that wraps up today's video. Let me know what your opinion on these gadgets is in the comments down below. And if you'd like to see more videos on the finals, consider subscribing. I try to upload at least once a week, and it really does help out the channel. That's all for now. See you all next time.